Well, friends, last but not the least, one of the cherished perspective which I enjoy the most, and I do try to live my life according to that, constructivist perspective. And this perspective defies the very understanding of the behavioristic, cognitivistics and other perspectives in the area of learning and knowledge. This perspective very clearly states that knowledge is not a thing, not an object which can be transferred from one individual to another. Knowledge can only be constructed, and a learner constructs the learning and constructs the knowledge on the basis of his or her socio-cultural experiences. Because all knowledge is constructed and consists of what individuals create and express. And it is also claimed that all knowledge is a tentative, subjective and personal. It means it defies the objectivity of knowledge. It defies the permanency of thoughts, ideas and knowledge. It defies the certainty of human learning and its progress. Why? Because individuals make their own meaning from their beliefs and experiences. So, changes in behavior and internal changes, right? To some extent they accept this, but the first they don't at all. So, what is knowledge? What is a knowing? How do we come to know what we know? These were important questions that became the concerns for the epistemologists or the philosophers who studied knowledge. And friends, in the history of epistemology, the trend has been to move from a static, passive view of knowledge towards a more adaptive and active view. And it is a theory of learning that has roots in both philosophy and psychology. You must be wondering, how come philosophy? Like, see, when you will find that most of the philosophies advocate that there is something like ultimate reality. And one of the purposes of this life is to know that ultimate reality. On the contrary, this perspective very clearly says no reality is ultimate reality. Every reality is a mentally and socially constructed reality, and these realities are constructed by human minds in a given socio-cultural context. Now, what is implication of this particular statement as far as the instructional design is concerned? That don't present anything in a final form. Don't claim that this is the final forte of the knowledge. What is right today, tomorrow it will become wrong. What is wrong today, there is a possibility that the same wrong will become right tomorrow. So friends, constructivism suggests that individuals create their own understanding based on the interaction of what they already know and believe, and the phenomena or ideas with which they come into contact. And that's why, friends, it is a perspective of how the learner constructs knowledge from experience, which is unique to each individual. And therefore, I have no hesitation to say that the constructivism is a system of explanations of how learners as individuals adapt and refine and construct their knowledge. And here learners actively restructure knowledge in highly individualized ways based on intellectual configurations or existing knowledge and formal instructional experiences. No matter what, thousands of teachers teach Pythagoras' theorem in one way, but each time each teacher understands it differently. And that's why, as far as the process of construction of what Pythagoras' theorem states, right, gives a different insight to each individual. Now, who are the people? Many people. Vico, Kant, Vygotsky, Piaget, even Brunner to some extent, right, and many others. Now, as far as the understanding of Vygotskian perspective is concerned, I would like to discuss with you, friends. When the behavioristic school psychologists could not understand what mind is all about because it's so complex, or what soul is all about, they shifted their axis to behavior. That through behavior I can understand what mind is all about, what soul is all about. When cognitivists say it is a purely a biological and internal function which is a neural in nature, then there was a psychologist known as Vygotsky who challenged and who said, mind is not inside there. When somebody asked, what is a mind and where is the mind? And he said, where is the mind? Mind is not there inside the head. Mind is out there in the society and the culture in which human being resides. So as is the society and culture, so will be your mind. So from the social constructivist viewpoint, it is important to take into account the background and the culture of the learner throughout the learning process. Now, what is the concept of a zero? Mathematically, majority of the people think that it is the same for every mathematics student and mathematics teacher. My understanding is that's not correct. Every mathematical concept has its social and cultural concept as well, friends. Well, so what I am trying to say is that in a social context and the language are fundamental to the learning. Social constructivism recognizes these aspects of learning and knowledge construction, not knowledge transference. Knowledge cannot be transferred at all. So based on this discussion, I would like to say that constructivism acknowledges knowledge is not fully known and fixed. It is not permanent. It keeps changing, it will keep on changing. There is a real world that we experience, but many ways to structure that world. Knowledge is somewhat personal. The learner plays an active role in the personal creation of knowledge through experiences. Learning is a social process in which the learner constructs meaning that is influenced by the interaction of prior knowledge and the new learning events. Now, directly coming to the constructivist instruction. As we have discussed earlier, constructivism emphasizes knowledge construction rather than the knowledge reproduction or the knowledge transfer in the form of rote memory. Then you must be wondering, what do you mean by knowledge construction, and how and what is the implication for constructivist instruction? Knowledge construction takes place in individual context and through negotiation and collaboration with the group members. The learner's previous knowledge, beliefs and attitudes are considered in the knowledge construction process. I'll give you a good example. When I made a statement that no reality is ultimate reality in this world, even the reality of the God is contingent upon human mind. So as the society, so is the God, concept of the God. And that's why even the concept of the God varies from society to society, culture to culture, nation to nation, civilization to civilization. So the process of constructing knowledge involves observing relationship between the concepts and viewing things in a holistic or integrated manner. And therefore, learning is inquiry based and partly discovery based, heuristic in nature. The role of an instructional designer is to set up problems or project and provide mechanism to monitor, to explain and guide the direction of inquiry to the learner. So friends, the essential features of constructivism that find prominence in the instructional designs are: number one, can we design our SLM or any our e-content program which help us to depend on learning through discovery? And for this reason, Construction of meaning or concepts or principles, etc., take place through discovery, where the learners are placed in problem-solving situations. The learner draws on his or her own experience and prior knowledge and interacts with his or her environment by exploring and manipulating the objects, wrestling with questions and controversies, or performing experiments. So the learners construct new ideas by selecting and transforming ideas, propounding tentative views, and by taking ownership of the learning process and outcomes. And for this reason, instruction must be concerned with presenting experiences and contexts that make learners willing and able to learn through discovery of meaning. So, one of the main reasons for constructing knowledge through discovery is that you cannot teach people everything they need to know. The best way you can do this is to position them where they can find what they need to know, when they need to know it, etc., etc. And then you can design your instructional material on the basis of the concept given by Vygotsky, for example, zone of proximal development. What is that? According to Vygotsky, there are three ways of learning. Imitative learning, where one person tries to imitate the other in a given sociocultural context. Instructed learning, where learners internalize the instructions of the teacher or any adult and use these to control their learning. And third, very important, collaborative learning, where a group of peers strives to understand each other and through their interactions, learning occurs, friends. So, Vygotsky is JPD can be utilized in instructional designing, and there is a thinker and researcher called Gallimore and Tharp, and in 1990 they published one work based on JPD and suggested that there are 4 stages in ZPD and that a learner goes through. The first stage is, in this stage the learner's performance is assisted by more capable persons such as parents, teachers, peers or any senior adult. Second stage, there is a less dependence on external assistance and the performance begins to become internalized. The learners help themselves by using self-directed speech, etc., etc. Similarly, you can learn the techniques. Please read the theoretical foundation of scaffolding. Please consult our SLM and other source materials. Scaffolding is a very, very powerful concept. But the challenge is, can we develop a material, our SLM, on the basis of ZPD and scaffolding? And that's the challenge. Still, majority of our SLM in the field of ODL is dominated by behavioristic orientation. Only theoretically we teach, only theoretically we study, but practically in praxis how to implement that, and that's a challenge, and collaboration is needed. Well, similarly, you can use the concept like cognitive apprenticeship. So, constructivist approach to human learning have led to the development of theory of cognitive apprenticeship. What's that? It holds that masters of a skill often fail to make into account the implicit process involved in carrying out the complex skills when they are novice or beginners. So, to combat these tendencies, cognitive apprenticeships are designed to bring their tacit process into the open, where students can observe, enact and practice them with the help or assistance from the teacher. So, by using process such as modeling and coaching, cognitive apprenticeship, they also support the stages of skill acquisition. So, cognitive stage, associative stage and autonomous stage. Keeping all these 3 stages in mind, you can design this. I am not going to talk about coaching, most of the people you know, but yes, coaching is one of the examples of scaffolding, nothing else. And most important thing that constructivism advocates is the contextual learning. Until and unless you make your teaching and learning, you make your instruction contextualize, it is not going to help your learners learn in a meaningful way. So, the contextual approach recognizes that learning is a complex and multifaceted process that goes far beyond drill oriented stimulus and response knowledge, etc., etc. So, why? Because in context, learning occurs only when students process new information or knowledge in such a way that it makes sense to them in their own frames of reference, that is their own inner world of memory, experience and responses. And this approach to learning and teaching assumes that the mind naturally seeks meaning in context, that is in relation to a person's current environment, and that it does so by searching for relationships that make sense and appear useful. Similarly, n number of materials are there related to contextual instruction and learning. And as far as the contextual instruction and learning strategies based on constructivist perspective is concerned, we can think of designing our instruction something like PBL, problem based learning. What is that? As I have said just now, contextual learning can be contextualized only for meaningful instruction and learning. So, contextual learning can be problem based, where the students begin with simulated or real problem. Students use critical thinking skills and a scientific approach to inquiry to address the problem or issue. They may also draw upon multiple content areas to solve these problems. You can also use the technique called using multiple context. So, while constructing knowledge, the students might use various resources and contexts such as community. So, because I consider the community as the biggest source of knowledge, neighborhood, family, school and so on and so forth. Then you can also think a strategy like drawing upon student diversity. So, writing SLM from the perspective of constructivist or designing an instruction from the constructivist is a big challenge. It can only be a contextual. You cannot develop any instructional design which is universal in nature. Similarly, you can also think of the strategies like self-regulated learning, independent learning groups, authentic assessments. Friends, I will suggest that all these concepts or all these strategies which are used for contextual, instructional and learning, please refer our SLM. Okay. So, finally, what is the application of constructivist perspective in instructional design? The first application of constructivist perspective is the anchored instruction. The anchored instruction approach in an attempt to help a learner become more actively engaged in learning in a situation or anchoring instruction in a unit. So, the learning environments are designed to provoke the kinds of thoughtful engagement that helps learners develop effective thinking skills and attitudes that contribute to effective problem solving, and most importantly, which is a time and again people have mentioned in the area of education, in the larger discourse of education, that is a critical thinking. And therefore, learning activities should be designed around an anchor which is often a story, adventure or situation that includes a problem or issue to be dealt with that is of interest to the learners. And therefore, friends, my suggestion would be that the instructional materials should include rich resources that learners can explore as they try to decide how to solve a problem. For example, interactive video disc programs. Well, second, PBL, as I said, I am not going to mention PBL again, but PBL includes anchored instruction. and it is a total approach to student learning from the constructivist perspective. So, PBL is a both. It could be a process, it could be a curriculum. Well, last but not the least, friends, what I would like to advocate is this, that the constructive perspective is not a prescriptive perspective. As you will find that most of the perspectives that are existing today from the psychological point of view, they are nothing but prescriptive. They will tell you, you do this, 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 this. But constructivism doesn't prescribe anything. Constructivism only suggest. They are suggestive in nature. So, these are the suggestions. Depending on your need, you use in a similar way or in a completely different way, the same concept. So, when I will use PBL and when you will use PBL, or X or Y or Z will use PBL or any other, it will be completely different one, and diversity is the key of constructivism. Right? But yes, you can think n number of ways which may help the learner to learn how to construct the knowledge, the given knowledge, and that's how the generation of knowledge takes place. So friends, with this I would like to conclude. Thank you so much.